The woman lying unconscious at his gate wore a physician's traveling coat, and her bag had spilled open to reveal surgical instruments that gleamed in the moonlight, instruments she'd clearly intended to use on him. Silas Merrick had seen many things in 4 centuries of breathing, but a would-be vampire hunter collapsing from exhaustion before she could complete her mission was a new experience. He crouched beside her, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the ink stains on her fingers, the way her breathing came shallow and rapid. She'd pushed herself too hard to reach his estate. The question was why. He lifted her easily. She weighed almost nothing, and carried her through the gate she'd been trying to breach. The irony wasn't lost on him. She'd come to kill him, or at least to study him like a specimen, and here he was bringing her into his home. But Silas had spent the last century as a country physician, and old habits died harder than he did. The woman needed help, regardless of her intentions. Inside, he laid her on the examination table in what had once been his surgery. He'd closed his practice 3 years ago when the questions about his unchanging appearance had grown too pointed, but he'd kept the room intact. Now he found himself grateful for it as he checked her pulse, too fast, and noted the fever flush on her cheeks. She stirred as he was removing her coat, her eyes fluttering open. They were gray, he noticed, the color of winter seas, and they widened in recognition. "You," she whispered. "Me," he agreed. "Though I suspect you were hoping for a different sort of reunion, Miss Fenton, Dorothea Fenton." She tried to sit up, then fell back with a grimace. "And you're Silas Merrick, the physician who treated my brother 7 years ago in Bristol. The physician who hasn't aged a day since." So that was it. He remembered now. A young man with pneumonia, and a sister who'd sat vigil for 3 days straight. She'd been, what, 20 then? Younger than she looked now, worn down by whatever had driven her to his door, with murder in her medical bag. "You have an excellent memory," he said dryly. "Most people don't recognize me after 7 years. Then again, most people aren't tracking me down with surgical tools." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "The silver scalpels were a bit optimistic, I'll admit. I wasn't entirely sure they'd work." "They wouldn't have." He pulled up a chair. "But I'm curious what made you think they'd be necessary. Your brother recovered fully, as I recall." "He did. You saved his life." She met his eyes steadily, despite her obvious weakness. "And then I started noticing things. The way you worked through the night without tiring. The way you avoided the windows during daylight hours. The way your hands were cold even in summer. Observant of you. I'm a physician too now. Observation is rather essential to the profession." She paused. "Also, you left your medical journal behind when you departed Bristol. It contained case notes dating back to 1847. The handwriting never changed." Silas couldn't help it. He laughed. It was the first genuine laugh he'd had in months. "So you've spent 7 years tracking me down because I have consistent penmanship?" "I've spent 7 years trying to understand what you are," she corrected. "The tracking down part only took 3 months. You're not as careful as you think, Dr. Merrick." "Clearly not, since you found me." He studied her more carefully. "Though that doesn't explain why you collapsed at my gate. When did you last eat?" She looked away. "Yesterday, possibly the day before." "And sleep?" "I don't remember." "Brilliant. A physician who can't take care of herself comes to hunt a vampire." He stood. "Stay there. I'm getting you food." "I'm not here to—" "You're not here to do anything except recover," he interrupted. "We can discuss your assassination attempt after you've had a meal and 12 hours of sleep. I insist." When he returned with bread, cheese, and tea, she was examining her surgical instruments with a rueful expression. "I really did think this through poorly, didn't it?" "Spectacularly poorly." He set the tray beside her. "Eat." She did, and he watched the color slowly return to her face. After a few minutes, she spoke again. "I wasn't actually planning to kill you. I just wanted— Proof. Evidence. Something concrete. Evidence for what purpose? There's a man in London, Lord Ashworth. He's been courting my younger sister, and I have reason to believe he's like you. But unlike you, he's not a physician with a decades-long history of helping people. He's a predator. 3 women in his social circle have died mysteriously in the past 2 years. Silas felt something cold settle in his chest. Ashworth. Edmund Ashworth? You know him? I knew him, a century ago, before he decided that immortality gave him license to treat humans as prey. He sat back down. Your sister is in danger, Miss Fenton. Real danger. But coming after me with silver scalpels isn't going to help her. Then what will? Information, strategy, and possibly my help, though I'm not sure why I'd offer it to someone who broke into my home with lethal intent. She set down her teacup with a sharp click. Because you're not a monster, Dr. Merrick. I've read your case notes. You've spent centuries healing people. That's why I came to you first. To understand what you are, so I'd know how to fight what Ashworth is. And if I'd turned out to be like Ashworth, then I'd have tried to use the scalpels and probably died in the attempt. She met his eyes. My sister is 19 years old. She believes Ashworth loves her. She won't listen to me, won't even see me anymore because I've been hysterical about her engagement. So yes, I tracked you down. Yes, I came here with weapons. And yes, I collapsed from exhaustion because I've been working double shifts at the hospital to save money for the journey while researching vampiric lore in every spare moment. It was poorly planned. It was desperate. But it was all I had. The words hung between them, raw and honest. Silas recognized the look in her eyes. He'd seen it in mirrors, back when mirrors still showed his reflection. The look of someone who'd do anything, sacrifice anything, for someone they loved. Your sister's name? He asked quietly. Lydia. Lydia Fenton. And the wedding date? 6 weeks from now, October 15th. 6 weeks. Not much time, but possibly enough if they were clever about it. I'll help you, he said. On one condition. Which is? You stay here while we plan. You're in no condition to travel, and I need you sharp if we're going to outwit Ashworth. He's cunning, Miss Fenton. Dangerously so. She hesitated, then nodded. Agreed. Though I should warn you, I'm a terrible house guest. I ask too many questions. I'm a 400-year-old vampire living alone in a crumbling estate. I could use the conversation. Over the next 3 days, Dorothea recovered her strength while Silas shared what he knew of Ashworth. They worked in his study, surrounded by medical texts and old journals, piecing together a picture of the vampire who'd once been his colleague. He wasn't always like this, Silas explained, showing her a daguerreotype from 1820. Edmund was brilliant, a surgeon like you, but he became obsessed with the idea that vampirism was a disease that could be cured. Can it be? Dorothea leaned forward, studying the image. No, I've tried. The admission cost him more than he'd expected. For 2 centuries I've tried. It's not a disease, Miss Fenton. It's a transformation, irreversible. But you've made peace with it. You use your immortality to help people. I try. Edmund chose differently. When he realized he couldn't be cured, he decided that if he had to be a monster, he'd be an efficient one. Silas set the photograph aside. He targets women of good family, courts them properly, then drains them slowly over months. By the time they die, they're so weakened that everyone assumes natural causes. Why marry them at all? Access, control, and cover. A grieving widower attracts sympathy, not suspicion. He met her eyes. Your sister won't survive the honeymoon, Miss Fenton. Dorothea's hands clenched on the desk. Then we stop the wedding. How? You said she won't listen to you. Then we make her listen. We provide proof she can't ignore. Proof of what? That her fiancé is a vampire? Silas shook his head. She'll think you've lost your mind. We need something more concrete. What about the other women? The ones who died? All buried, all mourned, all forgotten by everyone except their families. He paused. Though there is one thing, Ashworth keeps trophies. Trophies? Jewelry, mostly. A locket here, a ring there, items his victims wore. I saw his collection once, years ago, before I understood what it meant. Silas stood, pacing. If we could get into his London house, find the collection, match the items to the dead women, that might be enough to convince your sister, or at least to convince the authorities. Breaking into a vampire's house seems marginally more dangerous than collapsing at one's gate. Considerably more dangerous, he agreed, which is why I'll be doing the breaking in. You'll stay safely outside. Absolutely not. Miss Fenton, Dr. Fenton, she corrected. And I'm not letting you face Ashworth alone. You said yourself he's dangerous. Which is precisely why I'm coming with you. She stood, matching his stance. This is my sister's life, Dr. Merrick. My responsibility. And frankly, you need me. You're a physician, not a thief. I, on the other hand, spent 2 years working in a hospital where supplies mysteriously disappeared if one didn't lock everything. I know how to pick locks. He stared at her. You know how to pick locks. I'm a woman in medicine, Dr. Merrick. I've had to develop certain skills to survive. A hint of that dry humor again. Besides, you need someone to document what we find. Medical precision, remember? She had a point. Several points, actually, and the determined set of her jaw told him arguing would be futile. Fine, he said, but we do this my way, carefully, methodically, no heroics. Agreed, no heroics. She extended her hand. Partners? Her hand was warm in his cold one. Partners. They left for London the next morning, traveling by train. Silas kept to the shaded side of the compartment, hat pulled low, while Dorothea reviewed her notes. She'd compiled an impressive dossier on Ashworth, his habits, his social calendar, his properties. He'll be at the Pembroke Ball tonight, she said. Half of London society will be there, including Lydia. That gives us at least 4 hours to search his house. You've done your research. I told you. I've been planning this for months. She glanced at him. Though I'll admit, having you along improves the odds considerably. Because of my vampiric abilities? Because you know him. You understand how he thinks. She paused. Also, yes, the supernatural strength probably helps. They reached London by late afternoon. Ashworth's townhouse stood in Belgravia, elegant and imposing. Silas studied it from across the street, noting the servants' entrance, the garden wall, the darkened windows on the 3rd floor. His private study is on the 3rd floor, Dorothea murmured. That's where he'd keep anything he didn't want found. How do you know that? Lydia mentioned it. She thought it was romantic that he had a locked room, a place for his private thoughts. The bitterness in her voice was sharp. I should have known then. You couldn't have known. He's had a century to perfect his deceptions. Silas checked his pocket watch. The ball starts in an hour. We wait until full dark, then go in through the garden. They waited in a nearby tea shop, Dorothea nursing a cup while Silas pretended to read a newspaper. He found himself watching her instead, the way she bit her lip when thinking, the ink stain on her thumb, the determined line of her shoulders. You're staring, she said without looking up from her notes. I'm observing. Medical habit. Liar. But she smiled. What are you really thinking? That you remind me of someone I knew a long time ago, another physician who wouldn't back down from impossible odds. What happened to them? She died. Cholera epidemic, 1854. The memory still ached. She was trying to save a child when she contracted it. Dorothea's expression softened. I'm sorry. So am I. She would have liked you, I think. Same stubborn streak. I prefer to call it determination. Of course you do. When darkness fell, they made their way to Ashworth's garden. The wall was 10 feet high, but Silas lifted Dorothea over easily, then vaulted it himself. The garden was overgrown, neglected, unusual for a man of Ashworth's supposed wealth. He doesn't care about appearances here, Silas murmured. Only in public. The servant's entrance was locked, but Dorothea had it open in under a minute. She caught his impressed look and shrugged. I told you, useful skills. Inside, the house was dark and cold, too cold for a normal residence. Silas felt the familiar chill of vampiric presence, stronger than his own. Ashworth had been feeding recently. They climbed to the third floor, avoiding the main stairs. The study door was locked as well, but this lock was more complex. Dorothea worked at it for several minutes, her face tight with concentration. Almost there. The lock clicked. Got it. The study was exactly what Silas had expected: expensive furniture, dark wood, and locked cabinets lining the walls. He moved to the largest cabinet while Dorothea began photographing the room with a small camera she'd produced from her bag. You brought a camera? Documentation, remember? She adjusted the flash powder. We need evidence. The cabinet lock yielded to his strength, and inside— Oh God, Dorothea whispered. 3 shelves of jewelry, each piece carefully labeled with a name and date: Sarah Whitfield, 1873, Margaret Cross, 1875, Hannah Price, 1877, and more, going back decades. He's been doing this for years, Dorothea said, her voice shaking. How many women? Don't think about it now. Document everything: names, dates, descriptions. Silas began removing pieces carefully, laying them out on the desk. We need to match these to death records. They worked quickly, Dorothea photographing while Silas catalogued. They were nearly finished when they heard it, the front door opening below. He's back early, Silas hissed. We need to leave, now. But Dorothea was staring at something in the cabinet, a locket, gold with a small portrait inside. That's Lydia, she breathed. He already has her locket. She told me she lost it last month. Dorothea. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer. Her hands shook as she photographed it. She trusted him. Footsteps on the stairs. Fast, purposeful. He'd sensed them. Window, Silas ordered, grabbing her arm. But the window was 3 stories up, and even with his strength— The door burst open. Ashworth stood there, immaculate in evening dress, his smile cold and predatory. Silas. What an unexpected pleasure. His eyes moved to Dorothea. And you've brought the troublesome sister. How convenient. Edmund. Silas stepped between them. Let her go. Your quarrel is with me. My quarrel is with anyone who interferes with my affairs. Ashworth moved into the room with inhuman speed. You always were too sentimental, Silas. Still playing the noble physician after all these years? Someone has to counter what you've become. What I've become? I've simply accepted what we are. Predators, superior beings. He smiled at Dorothea. Your sister will make a lovely addition to my collection. She has such delicate features. Dorothea's voice was steady despite her fear. You'll have to kill me first. That can be arranged. Ashworth lunged, but Silas was ready. They collided with enough force to crack the floorboards, supernatural strength against supernatural strength. Silas was older, but Ashworth had been feeding regularly. They were evenly matched. Run! Silas shouted to Dorothea, but she didn't run. Instead, she grabbed the camera and smashed it against the wall, then pulled out a match and dropped it into the flash powder. The explosion wasn't large, but it was bright, blindingly bright. Ashworth screamed, stumbling back, his hands over his eyes. Vampires could tolerate sunlight with difficulty, but sudden intense light was agonizing. Now we run, Dorothea said, grabbing Silas's hand. They fled down the stairs and out into the garden, Ashworth's enraged howls following them. They didn't stop until they were 6 streets away, gasping in an alley. That, Silas said between breaths, was definitely heroics. I prefer to call it improvisation. But she was shaking now, the adrenaline fading. Did we get enough? For evidence? We got the photographs. That's something. He steadied her. But Ashworth knows we're coming for him now. He'll be prepared. Then we need to move fast, tomorrow. We confront Lydia with the evidence, go to the police. The police won't believe us. Vampire or not, Ashworth is a lord. We're a country physician and a female doctor. Our word against his. Then what do we do? Silas thought for a moment. We use his nature against him. Vampires are bound by certain rules, old laws. If I challenge him formally, in front of witnesses, he'll have to answer. Challenge him how? To a duel of sorts, not physical, legal. A trial by the Vampire Council. They govern our kind, settle disputes. If I can prove he's been killing indiscriminately, breaking our laws, they'll stop him. There's a Vampire Council? There is, and they take violations seriously. We're supposed to live in secret, in balance with humanity. Ashworth has been anything but balanced. How do we contact them? I already have. I sent word 3 days ago before we left. He met her eyes. I've been planning this too, Dorothea. I just needed proof. She stared at him. You've been investigating Ashworth? For 2 years, since I heard about the deaths. But I couldn't move without evidence, and I couldn't gather evidence without help. He smiled slightly. Then you collapsed at my gate with silver scalpels and determination. It seemed like fate. You manipulated me. I gave you what you needed: information, support, and a partner who understood the threat. He touched her shoulder gently. I'm sorry for the deception, but your sister's life was at stake. I couldn't risk you refusing help out of pride. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, the council meeting. When? Tomorrow night. Midnight. In the old church at Clerkenwell. He hesitated. You can't attend. Humans aren't permitted. Like hell I can't. This is my sister, and I will represent her interests. I swear it, Dorothea, on my honor as a physician. He held her gaze. But if you're there, Ashworth can claim you've compromised the proceedings. He can demand your silence permanently. Please, trust me. She wanted to argue. He could see it in her eyes. But finally she nodded. I trust you. But if anything happens to you, it won't. I've been doing this for 4 centuries, remember? That's not as reassuring as you think it is. The next night, Silas stood in the crypt beneath the old church, facing the Vampire Council. 5 ancient beings, older even than him, their faces impassive as they heard his accusations against Ashworth. Ashworth stood across from him, perfectly composed. These are lies. Silas Merrick has always been jealous of my success. I have evidence. Silas produced the photographs, the list of names, the death records he and Dorothea had matched. 23 women over 50 years, all courted by Edmund Ashworth, all dead within a year of marriage, all drained of blood. The council examined the evidence in silence. Finally, the eldest spoke. These are serious charges. They're fabrications, Ashworth insisted. Coincidences. I loved those women. You collected their jewelry like trophies. Silas's voice was cold. You labeled them with dates like specimens. You've been hunting humans for sport while hiding behind the guise of romance. Can you prove the jewelry is mine? I can. A new voice from the shadows. Dorothea stepped forward, and Silas's heart sank. She wasn't supposed to be here. A human, Ashworth sneered. Her testimony is inadmissible. Perhaps, but her photographs aren't. Dorothea held up a second camera. I took these 3 hours ago, in your study, the same cabinet, the same jewelry, still in place. You didn't even bother to hide them after we fled. You broke into my home to save my sister's life, which you've been planning to take just like all the others. She turned to the council. I don't know your laws, but I know justice, and I know that man is a murderer. The council members looked at each other. Then the eldest spoke again. The evidence is compelling. Edmund Ashworth, you are found guilty of violating our most sacred law, the protection of human life. Your immortality is forfeit. No! Ashworth lunged for Dorothea, but Silas was faster. They collided again, But this time the council intervened. Ancient power flooded the room, binding Ashworth in place. "The sentence is exile," the eldest continued. "You will be stripped of your vampiric nature and cast out, mortal once more. You will age, you will die, and you will face whatever judgment awaits you beyond this life." Ashworth's scream was inhuman as the magic took hold. Silas watched as centuries of immortality drained away, leaving a confused, suddenly elderly man who collapsed to the floor. "Take him," the eldest ordered. Two council members lifted Ashworth and carried him away. Then the eldest turned to Dorothea. "You should not be here, human." "I know. I apologize for the intrusion." She didn't sound particularly apologetic. "But my sister is safe now. The engagement will be dissolved. The threat ended." The ancient vampire studied her. "You have courage, and you've done us a service by exposing Ashworth's crimes. For that, you have our gratitude." "I don't want gratitude. I want assurance that no one else will suffer as those women did." "You have it. We police our own when we know of violations, but we cannot be everywhere, which is why—" The eldest looked at Silas. "We could use someone in London, a physician who understands both worlds, someone to watch for others like Ashworth." Silas understood immediately. "You want me to stay in London." "We're asking, not commanding." The eldest smiled slightly. "Though having a human partner who already knows our secrets might prove useful, if she were willing." Dorothea looked at Silas, surprise clear on her face. "Are you offering me a job hunting vampires?" "We prefer to call it maintaining the balance, but essentially, yes." The eldest turned to leave, the other council members following. "Think about it, both of you." When they were alone in the crypt, Dorothea started laughing. "I came to your gate with silver scalpels planning to study one vampire. Now I'm being recruited to monitor all of them. How did this become my life?" "The same way it became mine, I suspect. One impossible decision at a time." Silas smiled. "For what it's worth, I think you'd be brilliant at it. Would I have a partner, or would you be running off to some other remote estate?" "I think I've had enough of isolation." He moved closer. "If you're staying in London, I could stay too. We work well together." "We do." She met his eyes. "Though there's something I need to know first." "What?" "That night 7 years ago, when you saved my brother. You stayed with him for 3 days, never sleeping, barely eating. I watched you work yourself to exhaustion for a stranger." She touched his hand. "Why?" "Because I'm a physician. It's what I do." "No, there's more to it than that." She stepped closer. "You've been alone for centuries, Silas, helping people, saving lives, but always alone. Why?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I thought that was my penance. For what I am. For what I've taken, even if it was only animal blood. I thought if I saved enough lives, helped enough people, maybe I could balance the scales." "And has it worked?" "No, because the scales were never unbalanced to begin with." He touched her face gently. "You made me see that. You looked at me, at what I am, and you didn't see a monster. You saw a physician, a partner, someone worth trusting." "I did. I do," she smiled, "though I still think the silver scalpels were a reasonable precaution." "Absolutely reasonable. Terrible execution, but the logic was sound." She laughed, and he realized how much he'd missed that sound, how much he'd missed connection, partnership, the simple warmth of someone who understood. "So," she said, "partners in London, hunting rogue vampires and maintaining cosmic balance?" "Partners in London," he agreed. "Though I should warn you, the pay is terrible and the hours are worse." "I'm a physician. I'm used to both." She held out her hand again, just as she had in his study days ago. "Deal?" He took her hand, warm in his cold one. "Deal." They left the church together, stepping out into the London night. Above them, Stars glittered between the smoke and fog, and somewhere in the city, Lydia Fenton was safe, free from a threat she'd never known existed. I should go see her, Dorothea said. Explain why the engagement is off, though I'm not sure what I'll say. Tell her the truth, that you love her, that you protected her, and that sometimes the people we trust aren't who they seem. Silas paused. And that her sister is brilliant, brave, and slightly unhinged. Only slightly? I'm being generous. She elbowed him gently. I'm going to enjoy working with you, Dr. Merrick. The feeling is mutual, Dr. Fenton. They walked through the streets together, two physicians in a city that needed them, one mortal, one not, both dedicated to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. It wasn't the life either of them had planned, but as Silas glanced at the woman beside him, seeing the determination in her eyes and the slight smile on her lips, he thought perhaps it was the life they'd both been searching for. A partnership forged in desperation, tempered by trust, and strengthened by the understanding that some monsters were worth stopping and some immortals were worth saving. 3 months later, Silas stood in the doorway of their new office in Bloomsbury, watching Dorothea arrange medical texts on the shelves. They'd opened a practice together, conventional medicine during the day, supernatural investigations by night. The brass plaque outside read, Merrick and Fenton, Physicians. You're staring again, she said without turning around, still observing, still lying. But she smiled as she turned to face him. What are you really thinking? That I've been alone for 400 years, and I didn't realize how much I'd missed having someone to share this with. The work, the purpose, the terrible tea you insist on making? I was going to say the companionship, but yes, that too. She crossed the room to him, and he noticed she'd stopped maintaining the careful distance she'd kept those first weeks. Now she stood close, comfortable, her hand resting lightly on his arm. I'm glad you stayed, she said quietly. In London, with me. Where else would I go? You're the only person I know who breaks into vampire lairs with silver scalpels and a camera. And you're the only vampire I know who spent 2 centuries trying to cure himself so he could be more human. Her expression grew serious. That night in your study, when you told me you'd tried to cure vampirism, you said you'd tried for 2 centuries. Why did you stop? Because I realized I was trying to cure the wrong thing. I didn't need to cure vampirism. I needed to cure loneliness. He touched her face, his cold fingers against her warm skin. And then you collapsed at my gate, and suddenly I wasn't lonely anymore. That's remarkably sentimental for someone who claims to be a pragmatic physician. I've had 4 centuries to practice. I'm allowed one sentimental moment. Just one? Perhaps two, if you're very lucky. She laughed, and the sound filled the empty office with warmth. Outside, London continued its endless motion, carriages rattling past, vendors calling their wares, the great city breathing and living, and occasionally harboring secrets that needed protecting. And inside, two physicians stood together in the gathering dusk, partners in every sense of the word, ready to face whatever impossible challenges came next. Because some partnerships, Silas had learned, were worth 400 years of waiting. Even if they did begin with silver scalpels, and a woman too stubborn to know when she was outmatched. Especially then.